WHO Talk Show.
We are joined by a good partner of ours. For the since he's been here, the relationship with the Virginia Film Festival precedes his employment there. But since he's been here, he's been a friend of ours on the radio airwaves. So y'all know what time it is. About time this year, the artistic director of the Virginia Film Festival team, none other than Ilya Tovbis. Ilya, thanks for joining us again.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. Love being here. It's an exciting time of year.
Thank you. Welcome back.
Yeah, thank you. And the people definitely concur. This is a time of year that most of CVille looks forward to. Once again, kudos on you for once again making sure that diversity and that community and that voices get put on display at the Virginia Film Festival. But y'all are in your 37th annual this year, talking October 30th through November 3rd. So let's kind of start right there. Within your prepping and planning for the 37th year, what was the mindset that you wanted to take for year 37?
A lot of it is we've been around, as you say, our 37th year, and I think there's always elements to improve. There's always elements to change, but we did not want to reinvent the wheel. We feel, as you say, that it's a program that has really prided itself on being diverse, on being accessible, and there's a lot of different ways to jump into those terms. The best is through the programs themselves that we'll get to, but the key for us is to make sure we're truly showing the best in contemporary cinema. Just about everything we show, with one or two key exceptions, which we'll probably get into, are brand new films. They're not out in theaters, they're not streaming, but they're films from all over the world. They're documentaries, they're narratives, they're fiction. It's meant to be as broad brush take on the best in cinema today.
Nice. Good stuff. So once again, joined by Ilya Tovbis, talking about the 37th Annual Virginia Film Festival, October 30th through November 3rd. So, and just so people know, before we get into the nitty gritty of what to expect this year, where are we right now within the schedule as far as, folks being able to see what's in the lineup, let folks know when tickets will be available, that kind of thing.
Absolutely. We just announced our full program, so you can see everything there is that's on offer. That's the best place to do that is our website, virginiafilmfestival.org. At this point, you can jump on, see all of the films. It's over 120 offerings, so a lot to dive into. It's a dense 5 days of festival. You can see trailers. You can do just about everything with the key exception of getting tickets. We are in our donor pre-sale period, so if you are a donor to the film festival, then you have advance access. But for the general public, October 11th is the date to circle. On that day, everyone gets access to tickets, and we hope that you take the next week or so, plan out your schedule. There's some people that see 10, 15, maybe even 20 events. There's some people that are able to just make it to one or two. Either way, we want to welcome you with open arms, so you can spend the next week or so checking out the lineup at virginiafilmfestival.org.
This is a major program. People all across the city of Charlottesville and the world, for that matter, descend on Charlottesville for this film festival. And I'm just curious. I don't know if there's some award ceremony where there's a vote of best film festivals in the United States, but how would you kind of self-appoint the Charlottesville Film Festival in comparison to those that occur kind of across the United States?
Absolutely. I think that there are some very well-known festivals that are sort of the A-class festivals in the U.S. and North America, being Toronto, Sundance, South by Southwest. I think these tend to have national and international profile. But really the next set of film festivals we belong to, which is very credible regional festivals. So as you mentioned, we bring in guests from literally all over the world. We have guests coming in from Europe. We have guests coming in from Latin America, all throughout the U.S., as well as our own backyard.
Okay.
But I think what distinguishes us is a regional film festival that matters, that has these sorts of high caliber, very often Academy guests, Academy awarded, and a membership of the Academy coming in. And I think we're a quite credible enterprise, not just for a local community, but all throughout the country.
Yep. Thank you for that, man. We're talking 37th Annual Virginia Film Festival with the artistic director, Ilya Tovbis. So he, we'll remind y'all of the dates again by the end of the interview, and we also put it in the comment section of this stream as well. But man, let's dig into it though. Let's so the people know exactly what we're talking about, with some things to come to expect. Let's start with sort of the highlights, sort of the marquee moments during this week. What's some of the things that you all want to highlight the most coming up?
Sure. So I'll start with a few of our keynote nights, being opening, centerpiece, and closing. We opened the festival with a really exciting film. It's called Anora. It's from Sean Baker. Mm-hmm. For those that are fans of American independent cinema, his name will ring out. You'll remember Tangerine or Red Rocket, Florida Project, and others. He's really considered one of the top and most important American auteurs, American independent filmmakers, and you do not have to take just my word for it. The most important film festival in the world since its founding, also the oldest film festival, is the Cannes Film Festival in France. And it has been since 2011 that an American filmmaker has walked home with the Palme d'Or, the most important prize at the most important festival. Okay. And Sean Baker just did it this year with this film, Anora. So we are really excited to screen that as our opening night film on the 30th of October. It's going to be at the Paramount, and we are going to have special guests from the cast. We're not quite ready to announce who they are yet because we're dotting some I's, crossing some T's on that, but it's going to be a really exciting evening. And as just a short idea of what it's about, this film centers on the titular character, Anora. She mostly goes by Ani. She's an exotic dancer in Brooklyn who sort of sees her ticket to a golden life, to an improvement in life. Through this marriage with a young man. They get married almost overnight. They meet quickly. They get married, and a better life is to come. But it turns out that his dad is a Russian oligarch. And when his dad hears about this union, he is none too happy. He books it over to the country, and he attempts to break it up. And while there might be some serious themes, there are some serious themes, as you could hear in that description, the mode of the storytelling, it's really a 21st century update on the screwball romantic comedy. On a screwball comedy, it's very funny. It'll have you floating on air, incredibly textured, layered characters who you will want to spend even more time with. I'm confident people are going to be floating on air as they walk out of the theater.
No way. Well, that says a lot. That says a lot.
Indeed. Yes, indeed.
So from there, I can hop to a couple of nights forward. In the afternoon, our centerpiece screening is going to be another pretty wild tale. This one is Emilia Perez, also saw sort of major highlights coming out of the Cannes Film Festival, and now New York Film Festival, Toronto, and some of the other biggest stops in the film festival world. This is a pretty wild story. It centers on Carlos Sofia Gascon, who plays a narco trafficker in Mexico, who begins at first shots and eventually surgery for gender affirmation, and wants to start a new life, wants to leave the old life behind, transform into Emilia Perez. But before, when she was in Mexico, she was married to a character played by Selena Gomez, has lovely kids, has a great relationship. And so when in the dead of night absconds, has the surgery, just can't give up that old life, and returns in a sort of secretive guise back to Mexico at great danger to everyone around. This features Zoe Saldana, Selena Gomez, and Carlos Sofia Gascon, the central actress, became the first openly trans actor to ever win an award at the Cannes Film Festival. Really excited about this screening. I should also mention, on top of all of these different elements, it's part soap opera, and it's in many parts a musical as well. So it's a pretty wild story to wrap your mind around. You have to see it on the big screen in order to really understand what this is about. And that's going to be on Saturday, November the 2nd at the Paramount at 3:30. Go ahead.
Let me ask you a question about that, because I'm curious. So you mentioned Selena and Rosario. Right. Zoe. I'm sorry.
Zoe Saldana. Yes.
I got Rosario Dawson on the brain for some reason, but she's in one of these films, right? Rosario Dawson. I'm pretty sure I saw her on the screen on one of these films coming up when I was at the reception. But you talking about Selena and Zoe. So I'm curious, like when it comes to your to your perception of selecting films and whatnot, does it weigh any when you have sort of like recognizable names like that versus one that may be totally independent with like new with new actors and actresses? Does that come into play at all, or is it all about the actual product?
I mean, first and foremost, it has to be films that we're passionate about. It's a dense program, but it's chosen from a much larger selection. So we get nearly 2,000 films that we solicit and they're also submitted to us. So we have sort of our choice of a lot of different films. Many of them are great. Many films we don't take are amazing, and we wish we had more room. So first and foremost, it has to be about the product. It has to be that folks in our office, myself, Jody, our guest programming team, and others genuinely feel passionate. This is a story we're telling on a big screen that we want our audience to share in. Of course, we make note of recognizable names, and really what we're seeking there is a balance. I mean, as you dive deep into the program, you will find plenty of first-time filmmakers, independent filmmakers, ones that might not have the same cachet or recognizability. It's very important for us to give amplification and give voice to their work. But we also want it to be, as I said, kind of a broad brush film festival that's broadly inviting. And people do want to see stars. And there's nothing wrong with that. We want to see people recognized. We want to see them shine a new light. For my money, I actually thinks is the best Zoe Saldana's ever done. And Amelia Perez. And she's had some great credits to her name. But I think this might be her highlight. So we want to track these stars as they continue to achieve new heights as well.
Okay. Any other panel discussions scheduled?
Many panels scheduled. We actually haven't even gotten into the formal panel discussions, but we can jump ahead. So the festival.
We don't need to, Charles, did you want to cover any other films before we move on to?
Well, for sure. If any other films you wanted to, highlight to make mention of now, feel free.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I'll mention a couple. So one of the ways in which we have to jump into what's kind of a dense program that we hang our hat on are themes or strands, as we tend to call them. And these are ones that we return to year after year. Not every film in the festival fits into these. Some films in the festival fit into multiple because, of course, there's an intersectionality of human identity. But one of the themes that I think we are most proud of that outside of when I go and have meetings, whether it's in Hollywood or even international film festivals, our festival, the Virginia Film Festival, is recognized for Black Excellence Series. This is a series that focuses on the African American and even African experience and what makes up the identity of Blackness, which is, of course, a complicated question. So a couple of highlights there, and there's many more in this series. There's 9 altogether this year, would be The Piano Lesson. This is the newest adaptation of the work of August Wilson. And as those that have followed the Washington family, as in Denzel Washington, have the rights to adapt his whole oeuvre onto screen. This is their third go at it. You might have seen Ma Rainey's Bottom, or before that, Fences. And they're back with A Piano Lesson, and this is truly a family affair. So Denzel Washington produces this film, but he is not in it and he does not direct it. He gives those honors to 2 of his sons. So Malcolm Washington, this is his directorial debut. And then John David Washington, who you might recognize from BlacKkKlansman as well as many other films. He is one of the leads alongside Samuel Jackson, alongside Ray Fisher, Daniel Deadwyler. It's really an all-Gus cast worth seeing for just that. But really the film is this incredible portrayal. It centers, just like the play does, on this heirloom piano that's been passed on through a couple of generations of the family from their enslaved ancestors. And there's a great argument at the center of the film what to do with this piano. Some people want to hold on to it as a traumatic and painful but really important form of memorial. Other people actually want to use it as a vehicle for a better life. They want to sell it in order to be able to afford to buy a piece of land to make their way forward. And especially this is in the 30s in Pittsburgh, where it is difficult to make money if you're anyone. It's specifically difficult when a couple of generations ago your family was enslaved. And so that's the center of the film, but it is incredibly visually told. I think of the 3 adaptations, this is the closest to true large-scale epic cinema. I actually really liked the previous 2, but they worked a little bit more as a play that was filmed rather than a true film adaptation of a play. And this has spectral, ghost-like elements. This has really soaring cinematography. I think the best of the works thus far. That's going to be playing on Friday night at the Paramount, and some exciting guests that we're going to be announcing about that one as well very soon. But A Piano Lesson, just a couple of others in that series to mention quickly. The Fire Inside is the newest film from Barry Jenkins. Apologies, Barry Levinson, another famous filmmaker, but not the one. Barry Jenkins, who you'll recognize from Moonlight. He produced and wrote this, and it is the directorial debut of Rachel Morrison, who is considered widely the most important female cinematographer in the States. You'll recognize her from Fruitvale Station and from Black Panther and others. And she makes her directorial debut, and it's the story of Claressa T-Rex Shields, who was and still is. She was as a young woman was a scrappy boxer from Flint, Michigan. No one, with the exception of a couple of members of her family, her coach, really believed in her future, and she went on to become the most decorated Olympic boxer in U.S. history, and that's male or female, against tremendous odds and showing great perseverance. So the Fire Inside is her story. And just one last one to mention in the series, and again, there are others, is a brand new film by Luther Vandross called Luther Vandross Never Too Much. And this is coming to us from Don Porter, a great documentarian who did Gideon's Army before. Don is going to be with us to accept our Chronicler Award for Best Documentary Filmmaker. So that's certainly one not to miss. I think Luther Vandross's fans will be dancing in the aisles for that one.
I have a question for you.
Yes.
You just told us about the Black excellence, right? Is it difficult choosing films and not being Black? If you were to see a film like Friday or slapstick comedy, it's a feel-good film. People gonna laugh. It might not show the Black community in the best positive light, but it's something that you know that is going to get a large viewing. Would that be a difficult thing to add to something as important as the film festival?
So I think it's a good question, and it's sort of an existential consideration that goes to the Black excellence question, but also well beyond it, because we show films from Southeast Asia, we show films from the Middle East. There's a few ways to answer it that are true. The first is almost no decision is singularly made by a single person. So I am not Black, and I do make decisions that weigh in on films in the Black excellence series, Middle East, and so forth. But we also have programmers and key artistic advisors that are from the community at large, and I think are more representative than any single person can be. If we're talking to a Black woman, she may or may not be able to talk to a Vietnamese woman's experience, or myself. I'm also originally not from the U.S., but I choose a lot of U.S. films. So I think it is never possible to totally encapsulate all identities in one person. And I think the best way to do that is to stay flexible, to talk to artistic advisors, talk to our guest programmers, and to try to come to a program that's as broad tent as possible, and that's as evocative of different themes. And we're likely going to miss something, and we're going to improve year to year.
Yeah. So while Razor's up there too, you mind talking a little bit about the Voices of the Formerly Incarcerated series?
Yeah, absolutely. This is actually a new one this year.
I didn't even lie, Razor.
What is he trying to say?
Voices of the Formerly Incarcerated.
Yeah.
I'm glad you pointed out. It's actually one of the things.
Talk to me about this here.
I will happily do so. Yeah, this is one of the programs that we're actually most excited about this year. This is a brand new initiative for us this year. It's not something that we've done in the past. So what this is a series. It's a block of 3 events. One of the events actually has multiple films, all happening on Saturday, November the 2nd, all of which give amplification, give stage time, give presence to filmmakers who were formerly incarcerated. Every one of these films is produced, is shot by, and features people that survived incarceration. So there's 3 different sets of stories. We start the day with Juvenile 5, which, as the title you might be able to glean, it's actually 5 stories of juveniles that had incidents with not with drug violence, with gun violence, and all went through the juvenile incarceration system, all got out. A couple of them are going to be with us, as will some of the producers of the story, to share their stories in real life. A little bit later in the day, we're partnering with a newish festival out of Richmond called In Thrive that actually specifically and exclusively does this work on incarceration survivors. And we'll have 4 short films, again, all from filmmakers that have been through the experience, telling their own tales. All of them will be with us for that event. And we close that set of programming with a film called Unlikely Allies, about a pretty famous case of Weldon Angelos, who ended up having really celebrity support, but it took quite a while to get there. Eventually, he had Snoop Dogg in his corner, he had Cory Booker in his corner, and he also had people on the right. He had the Koch Family Foundation, which is hard to find anyone more right than them, all of whom championed his cause. And not just his cause, he essentially committed a very minor crime, but because of draconian laws in this country, ended up doing an incredibly long sentence. Nobody pretty much thought it was fair, but it took a lot to change the laws around how long somebody might be incarcerated for.
And when it comes to grouping the films too, when you look at your short programs, what's sort of the mindset, but like behind getting the shorts together, like the way those were themed, maybe, or are there any themes around the short programs that you think would be good to highlight right now?
Sure. The shorts are one of the most exciting and most difficult to program. I'm actually glad to say that while I have a hand in all of it, this is one of the areas. We have a great young woman, Jan McConey, I've had the chance to work with for a few years, who curates that series and leads the grouping of that. But the reason I say it's the most difficult, it's just the volume. We're talking about literally probably over 1,000 films in the shorts realm that are considered every year.
And what constitutes a short?
So a short film, yeah, I'm glad you asked. It's really just a time designation. It's the duration of the film. So anything for us, and this is different film festivals, but for the Virginia Film Festival, we define it as under 30 minutes.
Okay.
Many of them are well under 30 minutes. They can be 5 minutes. They can be 2 minutes, 15, 20. But really, what that means is we're grouping a few together in order to come to a full-length series. And it's a great challenge, it's a great opportunity because you have so many amazing films. Again, the vast majority of them don't get in, not just on quality, but to your earlier point about they have to be grouped in a thematically relevant way. You're kind of coming in watching films on a particular topic, and I think Yad does a great job. One in particular that I want to point out there, because I think it has relevancy to the program as a whole, is for the past couple of years, we've been doing something called Our Wealth in Common, obviously a play on words on the Commonwealth, and that is looking specifically at filmmakers that are either from Virginia or use the state of Virginia and the themes relevant to the state of Virginia as central to their films, and that's playing on Sunday night. And we have a lot of great guests and a lot of good films for that one as well.
Yeah. Okay, so that's the Virginia filmmaking one that you just mentioned.
Yeah, so this is a good example of there being intersectionality. One of the things as the Virginia Film Festival that we, of course, pride ourselves in is amplifying the work of filmmakers from Virginia. So we do it in full-length work and in short work. When it's both of those, it's at the intersection of one theme that we have called Virginia filmmaking, and the other is shorts. But there are films that have multiple of those themes, and some of those films are actually Black excellence films. Some of them are Latinidades films, which is another series that we have in the Latinx identity. Some of them might be in the Korean or in the Middle East and South Asian or environmental or these other themes that we have coursing throughout the festival.
Yeah. So I know when y'all were here, I think maybe last year you had Tanisha on for her Unbroken documentary. Is there anything that's significant to Charlottesville this year?
Sure. There's a number of films that are very significant to Charlottesville this year. So I'll talk about one group of Charlottesville-based filmmakers. This is Ellen and Paul Wagner, who are going to be honored this year with our Gerald L. Belials Founders Award. He was the former governor of Virginia, who was the founder of this film festival 37 years ago. And they are Charlottesville filmmakers. Paul is an Academy Award-winning filmmaker. And their constant theme over 40 works these days is the telling and retelling of American history and great American icons. They trained their camera this time on the mother of American modernism, Georgia O'Keeffe. And this is the first time her story, and it's a pretty wild story for those that don't know it. If you just know kind of her flowery art or, some of the art that she did in New Mexico, that's a good way in. But she actually has a pretty wild story, some of which is rooted locally as well. Between 1912 and 1916, she was quite seriously, if you read her diaries, thinking about giving up on art. She just thought, look, there's no future in this. No one's really responding to what I'm doing. And she took classes here every summer, rekindled her joy and her love for the art form, and then went and took the New York scene by storm in the 20s forward. And this is before she, of course, famously moved to the desert of New Mexico, became a second wave feminist icon. She also had a really interesting, she always talked about her art was not sexual in nature. A lot of people have tried to say that the art was meant to be evocative of sexual tones, and she always pushed back on that. And at the same time, she posed nude for some very controversial photos. And she said, look, that might be sexual, but my work is not. So she's a very complicated figure, very interesting figure. And that's a, Virginia-based story, both parts that happen in Virginia, but also the two filmmakers are actually living in Charlottesville. And just one example of many.
Gotcha.
I have a question for you real quick, Charles. When it comes to what you just said about people that do movies based on history, telling the truth, right? We know that there have been a lot of stories in the history books that don't exactly tell the whole picture. So when it comes to the classification of a film, if a story was viewed to be only one-sided and not in its entirety, would it be called fiction or nonfiction? Could a film that was only told in my point of view and the people that it related to me, after the truth comes out, can it be changed to say that this is not true? This is a non-fictional story.
Do you guys vet the films in that way, though?
We do. I mean, we do categorize films as either narrative or documentary. It's an interesting question because there are a lot of films, some actually quite purposely playing with that line, and others, to your point, I think everyone represents their own perspective. They choose facts to leave in, facts to put in, facts to leave out. My take on this is slightly different. I actually think it is never possible to tell a full story in a single tale. And so I think it is a job of the film festival as a whole, but not any individual art in the festival, to be holistic and to represent multiple points of view. I don't believe it is actually possible to achieve full balance in any single work of art, in any single story, because it's going to be biased. Whatever filter, whatever color you put on something, whatever context, whatever facts you leave out, whether intentionally or not, and it can truly be both, means that you're never going to be able to capture the totality of the full story. Our lives are complicated. Our lives are nuanced. Who gets to tell the story, whose voice is left out or not. I think the onus there is truly on the festival as a whole to make sure that the totality of the work is representative and inclusive of many different voice forms. I think each individual artist, each director, each screenwriter, their goal is to tell the most compelling story with their own viewpoint, and we actually should acknowledge that that's impossible to be totally encompassing.
Yeah. And that's the beauty of art, right? It's like we can listen to the same thing or see the same thing and have take something different from it. I feel like that's the beauty of it.
And lie.
Well, yeah, you know, always got that part. Like, y'all have a disclaimer?
No, I mean, I want to go into a couple people in the festival that are doing this very purposefully. So there's a film we're showing this year called Pavements, from a really well-regarded, highly awarded. It actually just premiered this film at the Venice Film Festival, another one of the most important in the world. It's called Pavements. And it's called Pavements because it centers on a 90s indie rock band called Pavement that also has local ties. They actually were a couple of the leads, Stephen Malcolmus and Bob Nastanovich, met at UVA. They both went to UVA. It's the same scene that Yellow Tango and the Silver Jews came out of in the 90s. And this band, they came to Alex Ross Perry, who's quite well known as a filmmaker, and they said they asked him to make a film about them. But they said there's a couple of key caveats. One, we're not going to talk to you for this film. We don't want to be interviewed. We don't want to, in any way, shape, or form, shape how people perceive us. We want you to shape that. And they went to him because he specifically actually sort of lives and thrives and skates on that line you were talking about, sort of between truth and artificiality. And I also think that truth and realism are two very different concepts. You can really accurately portray something, but again, by dearth of what you leave out or how you portray it, you might not be getting at real truth. You might just be getting at reality, or vice versa. Right. And so he plays with these concepts. What he did for Pavements, he tries to really bottle the spirit of the band. They're incredibly mischievous, sardonical, sort of weird. That is part of their whole sort of brand and cachet. So what he did is he follows around, he looks at some archival footage, follows around real band members that do appear in the film, but he also casts pretty famous actors to play them. He also builds a whole, and truly did build this, a whole museum about their work, but puts in a lot of fake artifacts, and he mixes in real artifacts about their life. He stages a musical, and some of the mythology in the musical is purposely artificial, and some of it's purposely real. And on one hand, this is sort of just a fun game, but it's getting at and scratching at some of those very ideas you're pointing out. Something much more complicated is that the stories we tell ourselves become their own self-perpetuating mythology. And he wants to actually play with those ideas and look more at how we remember the band than any quote unquote truth about who they were. And I think you can apply those filters to nearly every story. And it's important that you do that when you're looking at eventually what is art.
So we are joined by Ilya Tobis, artistic director for the Virginia Film Festival, celebrating going into their 37th annual festival, October 30th through November 3rd. And as he said, you can find more at virginiafilmfestival.org with everything that's already live. The schedule is live. Tickets on sale to the public October 11th.
October 11th. That's right.
That we live for the public. So one other thing I was thinking too, we had mentioned like family and maybe even like the local artists. I know in some of the shorts, there's a couple. It looks like some young people got a couple shorts in there. But when it comes to folks looking to attend this with their family, any highlights to give them on that?
Yes, I'm glad you brought it up. So for the past couple of years, and this year included, we have a family centerpiece. That's the easiest if you can make one and you're available at that time. It's a beautiful film. Guillermo del Toro got an advanced screening of this film. It's called Flow. And he said if he had to pick a future of animation, literally this is it. So the film is called Flow. It's actually Latvia's submission to the Oscars, one of 10 foreign submissions to the Oscars that we have in the festival. It centers on a cat that's going through this journey after a great flood. And what's incredible about this film, there's not a single word uttered in the whole film, which means that it works for everyone, for adults, for kids. If you're verbal, if you're not verbal, if English is your first or second language, does not matter, because you can watch this film and be overwhelmed. And really audiences have it just premiered at the most important film festival in Korea, in South Korea, in Busan, for 5,000 people. And they sat there in rapt attention. It's an incredible story. So I would highly recommend Flow, which is playing on Sunday at 11 a.m.
And how are we considering this the future of animation?
So what it is, I think a lot of us, and I'm amongst this camp, to be honest, I love Pixar. I love a lot of Disney movies, but we've come to accept a certain form of animation as being kind of the animation that we're used to seeing. And this is a very independent, just the style, the visual style, the way it tells story. Again, the fact that it's not at all dependent on verbal cues and yet tells an incredibly emotional journey of this cat. I think there is something very futuristic and very exciting about this. This might be where cinema is going, where animation is going. And I'll say in general too, we're actually going heavier into animation this year than we have in several years past. There's another incredible film called Memoir of a Snail, which might be for slightly older kids and also very much for adults. This centers on a young woman who is a collector of snails. She's somewhat melancholic. She's a little bit awkward, and she kind of retreats in her own metaphorical shell as the film goes on, and then finds out she can't really live her life that way. And she finds out how, as someone who life has attempted to kind of make quiet and make small and put in a corner, how she can come out and truly be herself and take pride. And this is from Adam Elliott, we're going to be giving our first ever animation award. He's coming in for this. And his films have really swept every animation category. He is also an Academy Award winning filmmaker. He's won at Sundance. He's won at Annecy, which is the most important animation film festival in the world. So huge honor to have him in with Memoir of a Snail earlier in the festival on Thursday night.
I do have one last question. I'm thinking about a lot of the local issues here in the city and how any of those may be addressed or covered in the documentaries, right? And so I'm just curious, are there any films that are being shown relative to, let's say, mental health or homelessness, different things like that?
Sure. Mental health is covered in quite a lot of them, both fictionally and in ways that are international, but I think have local ties. For example, we're doing the U.S. premiere film called Demba out of Senegal and looking at a place where there's really a stigma even around the term mental health and how someone that's in bereavement for a past loved one and also dealing with active depression, how they can find resources in the whole country and the whole government that doesn't even respect the concept. And there's films like Prodigal Daughter that are a little bit closer to home, looking at undocumented immigrants dealing with mental health challenges, and again, how the resources may or may not be available from their local area to that. So certainly a lot of films hitting on that theme.
Okay. Thank you.
Ilya, thank you as always. It's always a rich discussion, very, very in depth. You do well. Tell Jody we missed him this year. but
I know he would have loved to be on here. I think he had something else at the exact same time.
It's very clear that you eat, sleep, and breathe this film festival.
Yeah, great job. Great job. Yeah. So once again, ladies and gentlemen, definitely visit VirginiaFilmFestival.org for more info on this year's 37th annual Virginia Film Festival coming up starting October 30th. So Ilya, continued success, and I look forward to seeing you in the theaters.
Yeah, me as well. Thank you guys. Appreciate it.